I'm here today to tell you a bit about infographics. And before I go on, how many of you, just give me a little hand sign, have seen infographics and know roughly about what I'm talking? Okay, that's good. Who of you have already done their own infographics before on your research? Oh, a couple, good. So if I'm missing anything, you have to help me out now. In the whole talk, I will first start for the ones who have no idea what I'm actually talking about, talk a bit like what are infographics and why we should use them. I will introduce to you a couple of useful types of infographics. There's quite a lot of them. Not all of them are useful for the work you want to do, but I might give you a nice overview of what could be useful for your future work. I will give you a small overview of how to build your infographics, a bit step by step. And then we look at a couple of examples of do's and don'ts. Especially the types of infographics and the do's and don'ts. I will use a lot of infographics I found for from various topics. So I think the best way to show how infographics are working is showing you infographics. And then we discuss what worked with them and what didn't. So what are they? They're actually pretty much a showcase of a key information. You will have a hard time trying to put your whole research, your whole article or PhD thesis in one infographic, because there's a very limited amount of text you can display, limited amount of space you can use. So it's a key information you want to display here. It's a very visually attractive. There's seats in the front in case you're still working. Be my guest. It's a very visually attractive mean of presenting results or ideas, and it usually it's better eye catcher and gets your audience to read about your stuff than maybe an article or a book. All the information is like in bite-sized portions. That means when you write articles, you write essays, you have pages and pages of detailed information you can give to the audience or to the reader, who will then understand your way of thinking and your argument. You do not have that with an infographic. You have very small chance of catching the audience's attention, so you have to prepare all your data very small bite-sized. It's a very good tool to reach a new audience. You will talk with your colleagues, with other students about your work. You will have the chance of presenting somewhere or people read your article. But it's always hard to reach people beyond your own field. And they might actually not read your literature, what you have written. So using an infographic, putting it on a more public site or in a place where all kinds of people will see it, is a good way of catching the attention of a wider audience. So that's the reason why we should use them. Sometimes it's a good a tool for showing a complex issue in a very comprehensive way, let's say. So you scrap all the details from a topic and you boil it down to a very specific one key issue you want to mention. And this is then visually displayed. So people who are who don't have the background you have can still understand what you're talking about and which message you're trying to get through to them. It is drawing attention to your work. So an infographic should always be, like, as I said before, like a showcase of a key information. It should always contain your credentials and what work you're working. So people, when they're interested by the infographics, they're saying, this is a really interesting topic. You should always have the links or the information necessary to find more of your work, more of your projects. So there you can then reach the audience beyond your own research field. You have people from just the public actually finding your work online, comprehending it, and wanting to read more about it. So this is a list of certain types of infographics I found. There's certainly more, and I haven't. If you find more and then you think, next time I'm bringing this presentation, I should have loaded, let me know. This is the ones I found and which I think might be useful for whatever you have in mind. I will present to you examples of each of them, which I think is a better way of going through the list. So the first thing is the actual information list. So I gave you just a list of types, but a much more like visually attractive form of giving you a list of things is, for instance, like this. This is just, you can see it's double-sided because I took it from the internet, so it's meant to be scrolled down on a screen. So it's very long, it's not very wide. I cut it in half so you can see a bit more than the first page only. The sources of plant-based proteins. And instead of just giving you a rather boring-looking table, which has all the sources and maybe even the protein contents of those sources, the authors of this infographic decided to actually show you examples of those ingredients, still including the small information on the protein contents of each one. But it's a much more visually attractive. So in this case, even tasty-looking pictures. So you are much more inclined to read more about it than just having one table with boring text. So another one is timeline. And whenever you see an infographic which has like the headline of the history of, that's usually a timeline. Here we have an example of 50 years of spacewalking. And you guide it through by something I hope you can actually see. There's a small dotted line following through the whole graph, and it's floating in the background of some space picture. So it's all very nicely in the same topic. And it just guides you through from the 1960s, from the first spacewalks, with nice illustrating pictures about what has happened, and then having in the end even a nice, you can't see that here, outlook to the future when we walk in space of Mars, apparently. So this is just a time of things has happened, illustrated rather attractively again. We have how-to charts. You probably have come across those more in the non-academic sense, like how to do this, how to do that. In this case, we have how to rock your finals. And this infographic is much longer in original, but I cut it here to put it on the slide again. And it's just like how to, in this case, how to become a good student and don't fail your finals. So there's a lot of tips. There's like sections, you can see those separated nicely. You have small illustrations left and right of topic-connected here individuals. You have the key findings in case you come across this infographic and you actually don't have time or you're too lazy to read the small print. You still have key findings in very bright colors. So in case you don't have time for that, you still can get the gist of it. So a flowchart, I think you're all familiar with what a flowchart is. You can make it much more attractive if you go for a flowchart showing your results. In this case, it's like, my code isn't working. So you have coding problems. You usually start here, and it actually says start here, which is a very good hint of how to read something complex like that. And then you go through questions, and answering those questions, you find your way through problem solving. So this is, if you have a problem or you have a complex situations where several aspects has to be taken into account, this is a rather nice way of guiding your reader through the solution you want him to find. We have mixed charts. This is very often in, like, from my background, social statistics. We have like a poster-like infographic, which is using a variation of charts like bar charts. We have some pie charts and other icons, which in this case is illustrating some values or some information from the trends of patenting in 2016. It's nicely done with the colors here that everything is in a rather neutral gray. You can still easily identify certain parts of this infographic, and everything which seems to be rather important is held in red, so immediately catching your attention. We have a comparison. This is often done if you have two, let's say, processes, two ingredients, two issues you want to compare to each other, going through a list of criteria. In this case, we have here a comparison between IndyCar and Formula One. So you have two sides. You have then the sections and the comparative information on each side. So if you have one or two, I would say maximum 3 issues. If you have, you still can compare them. If you have more, the chart would get too complex and not easy readable. The actual question posted within this infographic was, the biggest question, why does F1 cars are very much expensive, so much more, cost so much more? So this was the question asked, and this was the information given to the reader so they can make up their mind about what's going on here. So we have a location chart. This is very useful when you have, let's say, international comparison of things, or just events or information coming from different geographic areas. In this case, we have an infographic on lucky and unlucky numbers around the world. And the centerpiece in the infographic is just a world map. We all are familiar with the world map, so immediately we have something we recognize and we can associate with. So you relate to the infographic already. And then if numbers are displayed and additional information are given, you have already an idea in your mind where those numbers come from, how they relate, and you might be able to see patterns already. Another one is the photographic info chart. This is using photographs or real photographs as a major part of your infographic. This can be done in several ways. Here it is the most expensive holiday destinations in the world. And the infographic itself is all the white writing. And we see like a listing of all this destination. And the cheapest here is Budapest, while the most expensive on this chart is Dubai. And it's actually illustrated very nicely by a picture which is framing the whole background of Dubai. It's a landscape of Dubai, so it's setting the mood for the whole chart. And it didn't need much more text or much more graphics. This is all what it is. It's a rather simple and clean presentation of the otherwise boring table you would have. Another way is using the picture not only as a background, but as well here even as the centerpiece. So we don't have, as it was before, all the graphics in white and the information, the actual values and numbers are not covering the picture, because the picture itself is the centerpiece. Here we have multilingualism in the EU, and we have a stack of books, which I assume contains language-related material. Otherwise, it would be not so useful. But we have all the information actually around that, just as a frame to the picture. So there's quite some interesting ways of incorporating real pictures into your infographic. We have a hierarchical version. This is always including a structure. And it's using, here don't read the contents and don't take it for granted. It's more a very humorous version of the hierarchy of needs, which I think the original one, I hope you're all familiar with. And here it's a humorous version of how designers and non-designers have a different kind of hierarchy of those needs. And of course, internet is the fundamental need for all of them. The point here is that we all know that the pyramid has the foundation below, and all the less important needs are stacked on top until we come to the least important ones. So it's including a structure people are familiar with and people can relate to. So immediately the hierarchical order of those things is clear to us, and the reader can grasp this information which you try to give them. We have a single chart, which I haven't seen much in social science yet, but I'm sure there's ways of using this very grasping. So instead of having one big let's say, infographic which is using several charts, we have actually one big chart which is using small elements of graphics inside this chart. So instead of just telling you which are the tallest buildings in the world, having names of them and what is the total cost in years to complete, they also added the actual silhouette of those buildings. And many of them will be familiar to you. You have seen them either in person, or you have been to Paris or to Egypt. So you know the shapes just at looking at them. So it's immediately, again, engaging the reader to using his memory and his relations to engage with the infographics and being eager to learn more about it. We have visualized number. This has become rather popular in the last years. And it's just using like a whole range of numbers concerning one topic and just visualizing them attractively instead of just having them written down in bold. In this case, we have the only flaw on this infographic I can find is that this is actually the title, and it's smaller than most of the numbers, so you have to search for it. Once you know that this infographic is showing the royal attractions by visitor numbers. And many of those numbers are just very big, and you have to, even on the computer, if I looked at it on the computer, I still had to like zoom in to see the the actual text about it. But the moment it says something like, there's a shape of a dog, and it says 30, I want to know what the 30 means. And then when I read about it, apparently the queen had owned 30 corgis during the course of her reign, which is impressive, I don't know. But it's engaging. You have a little dog, you want to know what the dog stands for. Or you have, like, everybody here in the UK hold a pound coin, so we know the shape of the coin from the queen. So this is very engaging. And it catches your attention with the numbers and provides the actual information, what the numbers say about it. Well, they're small, so you have to go for it. It's pretty much, they're really tricking you into reading the details. You have an anatomical type as well. This is the last type I will show you, I promise. This is trying to show you a process which is otherwise hidden to us, like something happening inside a machine, something happening in like a black box. So something we can't observe or make a video of it. So it will show you like the inside of things. You might actually see it with an actual human body anatomical chart. That's pretty much an infographic as well. Here we have the coffee making process of a mocha machine. So you can see inside the actual machine, you see the ingredients working, and now you know how your nice espresso is actually done. So when you want to do your own infographic, you have to start somewhere. And the first step is always choose your topic, find your story. This is something, it looks obvious, like, yeah, of course I'm choosing my topic. I don't know. People really forget about this. People just, I know my topic, this is my research project, I will write about that. So they step over the step, and then they collect a lot of information, and they have no clue how to tell their story, and they just put everything inside, and it's just a mess. So try to really go back, step back, and say, this is my research project. I can't tell the whole story. I will have to choose one aspect, one big idea, one argument, and then you go ahead. Define your goal, what you want to tell people. Do you want to make them aware of a new process? Do you want to show them that there is a problem with certain things they might not be aware? Do you want to show that you found a solution to an already existing problem? So once you have a goal, like why are you making this infographic? It's the same as why you're writing a paper or why you're giving a presentation. You have to have a goal in mind. Why are you doing that? If you don't know why you're there or have made the point, your audience will not be able to find the goal either. So everything which serves your goal belongs in your infographic. Everything which doesn't has to be kicked out. Identify your target audience. If you make an infographic about healthy fruit for second graders, it probably has a different tone than if you make an infographic about biological chemical reactions in the human body for professors, let's say. So the target audience, once you have identified who will see that and who you want to see your infographic, will set the tone for the whole infographic for you. It will help you making design choices later. Finding the right information. As I said before, you will have big problems trying to squeeze your whole research project in one infographic. So we all know that you have worked weeks and months and sometimes years on a project. And to be honest, nobody wants to know about that. They only want, can you give me the summary of that? Like you have worked months and months and they want like 100 words. But unfortunately, that's the way it is. So from all the bulk of information you have to pick very, very small amounts of the right information put together so that people without the background can still understand what you're talking about, and they have all the information they need, but not too many details so they get lost. It's a very tricky part, and that's where most people go wrong. Tailor-made graphics. I also teach a course on how to give a good presentation, and I'm always warning my students that if you have already made graphs, you have made tables for your articles, for your essays, don't just copy-paste them, because what's good for an article is not necessarily good for a presentation, and what's good for the presentation is not necessarily good for an infographic, because completely different people look at those things in very different settings. If I'm on a PC and I see a nice graphic, I might be able to read like briefly over it. I don't want bulks of text to read through, because that's what I do when I read articles or books already. So pick the information you want to show and then think really hard, what's the best way in my infographic to display it? If you have already done it 3 times, it's a bit of extra work. It will pay off, I can tell you. Choose a format. And there we have what I actually wanted to show you. So this is a very long infographic, which you can't see at all when I show it to you later. And hopefully it will connect to the internet. Because you have to be aware where people will see your infographic. Oh, what's happening? So if you're showing it in presentations, you have like maybe as your starting slide. That's what you want to show people. So you know the dimensions of your presentation, whatever this is. If people see it online, you know you can make it very long as this one is. And then people will read the text. There's a nice geographic pointing. Then you have all the sections. So people have time and space to actually scroll and like that. If you go and present it on a frame like this, on a normal frame of a computer, this will be absolutely useless. You will have to cut it in parts again, and the whole thing is like. So think about where will people see it? With which kind of device they will see it? Will they see it in an open newspaper, and you can actually put a lot of in details in it? Will they see it on probably more on a phone because you put it on Twitter or on web pages on a computer? It all will lead your choices of design again when you know where will people see your infographic. We're living in a world where it's standardized. When you have an article, people will print it and people will read it. Some people will read it on a computer, some will print it out. But it's not so standardized with infographics. People have access to some kind of that with all kind of devices, so you have to keep that in mind when you prepare. A couple of do's and don'ts. Because it's easy to make mistakes here. What I'm telling my people as well in the presentation workshop, less is more. Less is always more. If you can say it the same thing with less words, without losing meaning, say it with less words. You can choose to use less colors and not overwhelm your audience, do so. This is a nice infographic, which I didn't even attempt to read because I'm not sure which format this was supposed to be printed on or online. Even online, on a big screen, it's impossible almost to read it. And there is so much information. It's probably true, and it's probably super interesting, but I'm absolutely put off because they chose to put that much information, but in an infographic because it's hip. The problem is, if they would have put it in a report, more people would have read it, because the people who read reports wouldn't read that, and the people who like infographics still wouldn't read that, because it's too much. So the effort is unfortunately absolutely lost on it. This is a very simple infographic, and the only purpose this one has is, as it says, what is seal? So I didn't know, but it only has the word. It has a very short description. Each letter is referred to one aspect, which I explained. The picture is very calming, fitting to the topic, and that's it. It doesn't try to do more because it doesn't have to. This was its one purpose, and it does it rather well, I have to say. So less is always more. Use sections and structures, especially when you have, like what I said, mixed chart infographics. So you have all kinds of charts and information all over the place. If you want them to read it in a certain order, or you want the audience to really understand this is a break, this is a new incident, use structure. This is a part of a very long infographic again, and it was on faux pas you can do in being in a different country. And different countries were just sectioned off by using a different background color. The faux pas itself and how to avoid it are again the same color but a different shade. So you're always very much aware what are they talking about, which picture. It's always a mirrored picture, so you know you're talking about the same situation. So all of this is guiding the reader very nicely, and you know exactly where one argument stops and the next one starts. Guide the reader, as I just said. So if you have something complicated, you have a long process, make it easy for the reader to go ahead. This is very nice because it has an actual start button. So we definitely know we have to start there. Then each process has its own color, so we know when one starts and the next one's finished, other way around. Each section also has a nice icon which represents very much the written text. And then we have an end button, so we know the process is actually finished. So this is absolutely taking the reader by the hand and guiding them through. They can't go wrong. This is idiot-proof, and trust me, we need idiot-proof. This is the opposite. So what is it again? It's the organization chart of the House of Democrats health plan. And they attempted to put something in an infographic, which is probably a 200-page report otherwise. It's absolutely messy, and I attempted twice to get the hang of it, but I failed. So this is so complex, there's no structure whatsoever, and it's probably true, but who can say? So avoid some, if it's too complex and you can't structure it in sections off, infographic might not be your tool to use. Color can always be your friend, but color can also be your enemy. What I said before, less is more. If you can use less color, go ahead. Because if everything is colorful, everything seems very important. I have no idea where to start. Actually, I figured out it actually has numbers, so I could start at number 1. But I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of different colors, and all of them are bright, and even the background is bright and colorful. It's beautiful. I'm considering printing it and putting it on the wall. However, it's just overwhelming, and you don't want to overwhelm the critic because they will not stay and read these the single sections if they just don't know where to look first. This one, on the other hand, while maybe a questionable topic of beer brewing, uses very few colors. It has a very light background, and everything is kept in the either gray or in the beer-related orange, and it's guiding the reader through, and it's all kept rather on the low key. So people can just follow as the chart was meant to be without just being overwhelmed with everything. So be careful and be reserved when you use color. Use meaningful graphics and icons. Throughout the graphs I showed you, there were a couple of good examples, but one I really like is this one. It's the water usage in US hotels. And instead of choosing normal bars, a bar chart, they have chosen to put the bar charts in watercolors. And the higher the percentage, the deeper the water, the darker the color. Then they have chosen not to make a straight top as it normally is on bar chart, but to make it wavy so it looks like water even. And the third is that even if you can't read those explanation words under those bars, the icons actually can give you a very good hint. So even if that information would be lost, you would still be able to read most of the chart only from the icons, because the icons are very clear, very clean, and very related to what we want to say. And that's actually all of it. I hope I'm all right with time. Too much? Too much. Okay. Then I stop here. No.